Welcome back to a brand new video, and today we're going to be reacting to Did Fazbear really steal everything? If you guys don't know what this title means, inside A Secret of the Mimic, it explains that Fazbear Entertainment stole what it seems like almost stole everything Edwin created for them. There was some stuff that he created that Fazbear did not steal, that they actually commissioned him to make for them. So yeah, let's see what Game Theory has to say about this. Let's not waste any more time and get straight into the reaction.
Everything we've known about FNAF was a lie. Or was it? On the surface, it seems like our old favourites, William and Henry, didn't actually create anything, and instead just stole it all from newcomer Edwin Murray. How much of that is really true?
Yeah.
And what if I told you, theorists? The answer is entirely up to you.
What?
Hello Internet, welcome to Game Theory, and welcome to our fourth and final episode in our Secret of the Mimic extravaganza. It has been a wild ride, loyal theorists. We've uncovered the truth about the Murray family timeline, we've solved the mystery of Mexes, and we've managed to figure out secrets of a previously suspected mimic, Sun and Moon. But the biggest question that I have yet to solve, and the main question I had going into this game, wasn't about the mimic, or Edwin Murray, or security breach. I wanted to know the truth about the origins of Fazbear Entertainment, William and Henry. These two characters we've known about since the beginning and yet know very little about. Where did they start? How did they create this empire? Who were they, really? But friends, nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared me or the rest of the internet for what we were about to witness.
Spring lock assembly may be required.
No! Whoa! Are you kidding me?
Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my...
To be fair, that reaction was several hours into stream, where all we'd witnessed so far was invention after invention that we thought had been a Fazbear invention for years now, only to discover that Edwin made it. Like the Data Diver, a device used to access certain points around Murray's costume manor that looks an awful lot like the Faz wrench we use in Ruin.
Huh, very suspicious.
Or what about the massive list of characters? Happy Frog, Mr. Hippo, Orville, Monty, Roxy, Moon, Foxy, Chica, Music Man, Helpy, even the wet floorbots from Security Breach share similarities to the Cleano fact. They're all here in Murray's costume manor with designs, schematics, and costumes strewn around the facility. Edwin and his wife Fiona designed them all. It felt like everything we'd known over the last decade had been a complete lie. It was never William and Henry, it had all been Edwin. Or had it? See, while at first it definitely reads that way, there are clues hiding in voice memos, text logs, and just in the physical designs themselves that show us the truth is a little more nuanced. So let's jump into our unfinished helpful carts, friends, because we've got to get to the bottom of this and figure out whether William and Henry invented anything or whether they are just complete frauds. Same old phone?
Oh my god.
Nah.
Okay, we're back.
First off, there is one important thing we have to clarify. Did William and Henry actually steal Edwin's inventions? And the short answer is no. I've mentioned in a past few theories little tidbits of information about this, but while it was clear Fazbear had some
okay, whatever Tom is on, I want some.
shady business practices and were actively stealing employees trying to obtain company secrets, which is not totally legal, they never actually stole Edwin's intellectual property. Edwin was a contractor, and so they would have contracted him to make stuff for them, like the demo of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza that we see in the R&D department. And that whole process would have included contracts that decided ownership, which we sadly never get to see.
Well, yeah, Fazbear Entertainment basically contracted him to make those characters for him.
Tell you though, as a former contractor myself, typically those contracts favor the client, the person who came to you to be a contractor.
OG Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, sure they were not created by Edwin, or not by Edwin. Sorry. So sure, they were not created by William and Henry, but they still hired Edwin to make those for them, and yeah.
When I would shoot or edit a video for someone, that would then go back to them and they would own the final product. I didn't own anything. But what about Chica, who was made for Chica's Party World, not Fazbear? Or Roxy and Foxy, who were built for Edwin's TV show idea? Those were definitely
Like, for example, every video I make, every video I edit, every thumbnail I make, I made those, but once I upload those on YouTube, they are not mine. They are YouTube's.
Edwin's, and Fazbear surely had no rights to them. Well, until they did. One of the text logs you can obtain is from Willie A himself, and while the message
sure
is
they're
cut
still
off
on
at
my
start, the
channel,
intention is
but
very
it's
clear.
YouTube's
Quote,
platform.
Software development and the entire MCM catalog. We would love to keep you on as a lead engineer. Although we now technically own the land, we would never touch the house your parents built. Afton was offering Edwin a position at Fazbear because he had just bought MCM, its remaining employees, the ground it's built on, and most importantly, its catalog of characters and inventions. Fazbear now owned everything. They never stole it from Edwin.
That's right. I forgot. They did. They did buy the whole entire land. So technically, they did not steal. Okay.
All his employees drove the business into the ground and then bought the rights so that they could claim it as their own. But let's be honest here, that's kind of a small nitpick in this whole thing. The real issue here is that we believed Henry
I forgot that was
the
whole thing.
Great inventors, and yet it seems like they just kind of bought everything and didn't make any of it themselves. How could Henry claim
trapped in prisons of my making
if they weren't his making at all? So let's take a look and try to clear things up. Henry may not be the originator of most of the characters we've attributed to him over the years. R.I.P. Chica was Henry's first theory, but that doesn't mean he didn't invent any characters. From the minute you step into Murray's costume manor, you will find one item that appears everywhere in the facility. Pizza boxes from Fredbear's family diner.
Yeah.
Now, while we are visiting MCM, the place has been abandoned for a bit. But what that means is that while the place was active, so was Fredbear's diner, which makes sense given Fazbear Entertainment was a thing and had the means to buy MCM in the first place. They need some way to make money. We also see Fredbear and Spring Bonnie on a number of posters throughout the place, identical to the ones we found in Security Breach. But notice what we don't see throughout MCM. Despite promoting posters for the characters of Fredbear's, we never see versions of Fredbear or Bonnie within the main facility. And that is because of
they're in the R&D department.
Every one of my creations are available for purchase or lease.
For Edwin to be able to say that, he would have to own the rights to the characters. But the fact that Bonnie and Freddy are missing implies that those two characters were not created and owned by Edwin, but instead William and Henry. Edwin has posters on the walls because there's clearly a long-standing relationship between the two companies, and based on his audio log telling us that they should
just hire some teens to wear the suits like we always do.
It seems like he has worked on the diner in some way. So the posters are just him promoting himself, going, hey, you know this successful franchise? Well, I helped make that. But he can't show any of the costumes or animatronics for Fredbear and Bonnie because he doesn't own the rights. They were created and owned by William and Henry. So nice big tick for them there. But that leads us into the big discussion around Fazbear.
Spring lock assembly may be required.
No!
They've showed this clip like twice now.
Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god!
Did Edwin invent the spring locks? Before this point, we've been under the impression...
Okay. From what I know, no. He probably invented like water safe spring locks, but he didn't invent spring locks, period.
That it was Henry who invented the spring locks, as during the Silver Eyes trilogy, we're pretty much told that outright. Quote, these are spring locks, one of the first ones Henry made. right. But now in Secret of the Mimic, we see plenty of Springlock suits. We see messages about Edwin making them, and we even get to travel around inside them, which is kinda horrifying. However, there is one big detail that stands out pretty quickly, which made me reconsider whether this was another acquired contraption. The fact that we cannot be killed by the Springlocks. Springlock suits are notoriously finicky, causing fatal injury at the first sign of sudden movement or water, and yet we managed to fall through an entire floor and yet sustain no injuries. It's almost as if they are not the same kind of Springlocks, and that is exactly the case. We receive a text log from Edwin during the game that specifically
So was I right that those are not the same kind of Springlocks as Henry and William use, but because those are safer Springlock suits?
about updating the Springlocks to sustain water damage and be okay. There's also the fact that the original Springlocks were designed to be both suits
so it was
and
correct.
animatronic, while the new ones seem to only really be suits. And finally, the versions of Fredbear and Spring Bonnie down in the R&D department, while looking
game theory's
somewhat like the versions we know, have colored exoskeletons made of metal, rather than the felt-based material that would stain and discolor like we know from modern Springtrap. And to top that off, there's an audio log in the same area that talks about Springlocks being used for a long time before this moment.
It would be so much easier to keep using the Springlocks.
The fact that there have been Springlocks used for Hen, while these new improved metal versions of the Springlocks for Fredbear and Spring Bonnie currently only exist down here in the facility, it tells us that there are other Springlocked versions of these characters in existence. Felt-based ones that use the old, water damage-prone designs. So that's it. Case closed. Edwin made the new Springlocks, but Henry can still have made the originals, right? Well, I really wanted that to be true. Believe me, I did.
Are you
but
serious?
When Ash and I went back to find all the secrets
Oh my
on GTI,
God.
I discovered this message on one of the Mrs. Helpfuls to Edwin from Fiona.
I'm worried about the new suit design. One of my costumers, Vic, nearly lost his hand today. All he did was spill a can of pop and the thing snapped shut like a bear trap.
Fiona is worried about Edwin's Springlock designs, and the one her team member was wearing does end up having an issue with water damage. It's almost like that text log we read earlier was a response to Fiona's request to check out the problems, because Edwin was involved in the creation of the original designs. This isn't the only time Fiona is worried about Edwin rushing out designs.
Oh my God, so are you, so I swear to God, if they freaking what's the word? I can't think of it. Frick.
I have a lot of new ideas and new projects coming in. The staff can't keep up with all your changes. But I think you need to step back a little and focus on one project at a time.
This is a pattern of behavior for Edwin. He sprints through dozens of projects, moving on to the next one so fast that his previous invention isn't fully finished, leading to a bunch of failures and returns like we see in the text logs. And so the idea that these Springlock suits that were incredibly dangerous and faulty were also Edwin's creations actually makes a lot of sense for his character. And yes, there is a chance that the original Springlocks were potentially a collaboration between both Henry and Edwin. But right now, I'm just not sure the evidence is there. The books say that Henry was the inventor of the Springlocks.
Yeah,
but that's a very different continuity.
Sorry,
The games
I'm sorry.
never
If they retcon the original books, I swear to God.
Like, the closest we get is
Prisons of my making.
But here, Henry is talking about the normal animatronics, the ones that Edwin never finished. And so you could plausibly say that Henry was the one who made them. Edwin did say that Henry was the one changing the designs.
I got the change order from Hen last night. Why change it now? Now they changed their minds. Well, we're so close to final. New concepts are, frankly, creepy.
But he never mentioned Springlocks. That doesn't make this a retcon. It's just a realigning of our understanding between the different continuities of these characters, which is basically what Secret of the Mimic did with all of the book continuities. In the novel trilogy, Henry made the Springlocks, but in the games, it was Edwin. Who knows? Maybe it'll turn out to be Afton in the movies. But thanks to Edwin's eventual
Probably.
demise and new Springlocks, those characters were never finished. finished. Fazbear just had to keep using Edwin's old designs, so I guess you could say that it was karma that got Afton in the end. In more ways
So
than
in the books it was Henry, and in the games it was frickin' Edwin. Okay.
one. And speaking of good old Willie A, what did he actually do? I mean, we've always known he's a bit of a scumbag, so I don't think his lack of inventions would be all that surprising. But just like I think we can still credit Henry with
The Fun Times Circus Baby? Not the suits of the MCI, but probably them coming to life?
the creation of the
Probably?
normal animatronics, I think there are a couple of things Afton can be credited with creating himself, namely the Funtime animatronics and the Scoop. In Sister
Ooh, the
Location
Scooper,
Pizzeria Simulator,
that's
we
a good
found
one.
blueprints for these devices, and they all have copyright attributed to Afton Robotics. Of course, we know that Foxy isn't his OC, that one firmly belongs to Edwin and Fiona, and
Yeah.
the whole stomach hatch design definitely borrows from Edwin's Springlock designs. But the animatronic part, the weird wiry bodies, we don't see anything like that.
That is
The Scoop also,
definitely
of course,
Williams,
bears
yeah.
resemblance to the Springlock crane that we find in MCM, and that we then saw in Ruin. They have the ability to scoop something out of a costume or Springlock suit or whatever. But all the stuff about remnant injection and storage, that's all Afton, baby. Which means at this point, we're pretty even. Edwin did make a lot of stuff that we thought were Henry and William, but that doesn't mean they were completely incompetent or unable to make stuff themselves. However, there is one more thing that we need to discuss. One more invention that, if it was claimed by Afton, could affect the entire timeline as we know it. You see, everyone, and I mean everyone who played this game or watched someone else play it, have been very quick to point out the similarities between David Murray and Afton's son, the Crying Child.
Yeah, I've
is
seen some stuff going around the internet about them looking similar, and
And they-
looking at these two photos, yeah,
Thanks to a friend
I'd
of the
say
channel,
they're pretty
Hyperdroid,
similar.
and a
Yeah.
handful of other theorists, last year we came to the conclusion that Crying Child's real name was also David Afton. But
I still don't like that name, by the way. It's David Afton. I still don't like that name. I still want to stick with Evan. I think Evan was the best name we could have came up with this character.
so much.
But first it was Chris, and then I'm like, okay, Chris, I guess. And then it was Evan, and I'm like, okay, Evan sounds better. And now it's David? Freaking, and then we get another character in the books who's also named David. So, like, what the heck? There's two characters both named David. What?
More to it than
Why?
just a name. Their
Why,
bedrooms look
Scott?
almost identical, and both of those bedrooms are in houses on top of a hill near a tree and near their father's work. They're both missing mother figures in their lives, with fathers who spend too much time working. One of the collectibles we get is David Murray's purple plastic telephone, the same one we see in David Afton's bedroom, along with a bunch of other similar toys. David
Yeah.
Afton is famously scared of Foxy, having ripped off the head of the Foxy plushie, and his brother Michael.
Oh yeah, and David, the as a baby was kind of scared of the Foxy plushie when Edwin kind of showed it off to him, right?
Bullying him wearing a Foxy mask. David Murray also
Yeah,
is afraid of the
yeah.
pirate Fox, crying when Edwin uses one of the Foxy hand puppets on his first birthday.
Ahoy there!
Yeah.
Oh, honey, you're scaring him.
Both of them even have a birthday party for them coming up on a Saturday, only for them to die on that same birthday.
I don't remember David Murray dying on his birthday. Am I missing something? I don't remember him dying on his birthday. I remember David Afton dying on his birthday, but never David Murray dying on his birthday.
Think about these two feels identical to a strange degree, almost as if they're the same person. But obviously, as I've mentioned, David Murray is dead, so they cannot physically be the same person. But you know who is still alive and kicking? The thing that was created to become David Murray, M2. And this is where we hit an interesting fork in the road. There are two ways we can look at this information. There's the more literal approach, where the reason these two characters feel so similar is because they are the same character. M2 takes on the role of David, and Afton adopts it as his child. Or there's the less literal approach, the idea that these similarities are actually parallels designed to point us in the direction of a different kind of Fazbear theft, that they took more than Edwin's creations. They claimed his entire story. And because this is the big finale, I wanted to do something special here. Secret of the Mimic has been all about getting us to re-evaluate our past theories, our past ways of thinking. It showed us that we can't hold on to theories too tightly, that we need to be open-handed and explore all the possible options to us. And so, rather than stand here and try to convince you that one interpretation is right over the other, I wanted to present you with both options. Explore the repercussions and flaws of each of them so that you can come to your own conclusions. So, on the left is the ending where David Afton
Oh, so you're giving us two different paths to take. Okay. I'm gonna do both of them. So, yeah, I guess I'll see you on we're gonna go ahead and do William is a thief first, and then we'll do William is actually innocent.
Searching for the effective methods to study for the
Oh my god, bro.
So you've chosen to take the evidence presented more literally.
Yep.
You want to believe that the reason that David Murray and David Afton appear to be one and the same is because they are one and the same. Or at least that both Davids are being played by the same character, M2. Interesting choice. Well, let's take a look at the evidence and see how Afton shapes up in this one. Before we can talk about what this path would solve, we have to figure out the how of it all. How was William able to get control of M2 and turn it into his son, David, the crying child, Afton? Well, that comes down to the secret ending of Secret of the Mimic. You see, in that ending, we complete Moon.exe. We get some glitched permissions that allow us to access special doors in the Murray household. And from there, we fix M2, turning them into the perfect mimic of David. M2 then goes to bed and shuts off as the game fades to black. This is the only ending where M2 is completely fixed, which allows him to live on as a child, as David, and therefore, in the future, could become the crying child that we know from the original games. One of the text logs we get from William directly confirms that he owns the land
Not gonna
Murray's
lie,
costume
that makes
manor is
sense.
standing on, including the house Edwin's parents built on the top of the hill, the one where M2 now sleeps. With Fazbear's ownership of the land and the IP and the inventions inside, that M2 would now belong to William. And so, with the disappearance of Edwin, William would likely show up, at least eventually, to claim what was his. And when he did, he would come across this incredible little machine, mimicking Edwin's son, David. Now, Fazbear already knew about this special animatronic that could fit into any costume and learn any routine.
Someone told him about M2.
But seeing it actually imitating a child, essentially bringing a kid back to life, that would absolutely have intrigued Afton. In the Silver Eyes trilogy, it's clear how much he idolizes characters like Henry, those with animatronic and creative genius, who were able to imitate the spark of life itself. He wants to reach their level of genius, to understand, to go even further beyond what they did. Sure, he could have just taken M2, turned it into scrap, or shoved it into another costume. But if he could figure out how it ticked, then he could create more and help his empire grow. It's for this reason that we see camera feeds down in the sister location bunker, displaying the FNAF 4 bedroom, the same bedroom where M2 was sleeping. He is monitoring M2, watching its every move. He threw different stimuli at it, high-pitched frequencies that mess with its vision, creating animatronics that looked like the stuff of nightmares, all to see how lifelike this thing truly was to a child. Afton was trying to understand how it worked. That's also why we see the Funtime animatronics using technology that allows them to mimic sounds and actions. It was Afton trying to replicate that same technology, but it wasn't fully there yet, because William wasn't the original creator, although they clearly did manage to mimic one thing correctly. In order not to raise suspicion, Afton would need to make
Sorry
Oh
to
my
interrupt.
god.
To raise suspicion, Afton would need to make M2 look like another one of his kids. We see masks down in the sister location bunker. Afton's attempts to create realistic human costumes, one that M2 would be able to wear out and about, which is why when the Fun Times encounter Michael Afton all those years later, another one of the Afton kids, they knew what they had to do. They mimicked what they saw M2 doing all those years ago, jumping inside the skin of one of the Afton kids in order to explore the world. They were able to mimic an action, but they lacked the nuance of understanding. Just like M2 would stuff people into suits because as far as it could tell, that's just where human bodies went. Feels like there's maybe a bigger lesson we could take away from that. But there are a bunch of other pieces of evidence from previous games that suddenly begin to line up when we continue down this train of thought. For example, why does Mike bully his brother? Of course, older brothers can just be mean sometimes. I should know, I am one. But if David Afton is actually a robot kid wearing a skin suit and they are getting all of this attention from their father, well, that would make any kid jealous and want to lash out. They aren't his real son. Why is he getting all the attention instead of me? It's not fair. Michael then goes on to have an obsession with the show.
I mean, I have a little brother, and when he, in the past, when he used to get all the attention, I would be very, very jealous of that.
Which the most famous and frustrating line is,
The baby isn't mine.
we've tried to make sense of this thing for years, but now we might finally have an answer. It's not that one of the kids was adopted, or that Afton had a kid with another woman. It's literally not a baby. It's a robot mimicking another man's child, David Murray. In the security logbook, Michael even comments that he relates most to Clara, as she is the one who seems to see the world she lives in as crazy. Just like Michael doesn't understand how people can't tell that this is a weird robot kid that his dad is claiming to be his sibling. But the biggest thing that this solves is actually less to do with M2 itself and more how the mimic existing in these early
This
parts of
theory
the
is
timeline
freaking
might
insane,
solve the
bro.
most infamous line in
Oh, I really
timeline
need to
might
get my
solve
YouTube
the most
Premium back.
infamous line in all of FNAF. I will put you back together. When this line first showed up,
Yeah, we could have never really made sense of this, but I guess we kind of have an answer for it now. With William putting Edwin Murray back together as David.
confused the heck
Or
out
not,
of
sorry, oh my god. William putting David Murray back together as David Afton. Sorry, I'm
all of us. Up until this point, Afton had been speaking in a bright gold text using the color FFF57, and he starts off that way during his final speech to the dying crying child too. However, when we then get to the put you back together part, it's a paler shade of yellow, FFFA0. It was confusing as there weren't really any other characters left to claim that color, nor did it make sense for it to be anyone other than Afton. It wasn't helped that in Ultimate Custom Night, when we're seemingly playing as Afton in Eternal Purgatory, we get lines from Nightmare Fredbear that repeat this idea.
Let me put you back together.
It felt like Scott just made a mistake and used Ultimate Custom Night to rectify that mistake. But now, I offer you an alternative solution. What if the reason it's a similar color to Afton's gold text, but slightly different, is because it isn't Afton, but someone or something pretending to be Afton, mimicking him, if you will. Remember, while we've been focusing on M2 as David Afton, there's another character that Secret of the Mimic introduces to us. M1, Fiona Murray. All she wanted to do was to put her son David back together.
I beg you, put it on the side and fix M2.
And in the secret ending, that's what she got. But then Afton swooped on in and took her son for himself. She was stuck inside the cradle, the Mex's machine. She would have been powerless to stop him. But, as we've talked about before, she was taken away and likely installed into Fazbear's systems. So when Michael took things too far and got M2's head crushed inside of Fredbear, her motherly instincts kicked in. She managed to take over the walkie-talkie and speak directly to M2, promising to put her child back together again. Meanwhile, Afton would have seen M2 as broken and of no use.
Yeah.
If anything, he'd actually kind of been an inconvenience to him based on Fredbear's dialogue. Plus, he couldn't even fix him if he wanted to. He was just trying to figure out how it worked. He hadn't actually solved it. And regardless, he now had his new Fun Times, who were using some kind of mimicking software. Those were more than what he needed. So he threw M2 away.
Yeah,
into
that
the bowels
makes
of the
sense for
rundown
Afton.
facility he
Yeah.
owned, MCA. M and cemented the whole thing up to start over. But I suspect M2 wasn't completely broken. Edwin beat this thing to a mechanical pulp, and yet it managed to carry on. So, once again, just like in the 1970s, this violence towards M2, it getting crushed by Fredbear, taught it how to be violent again. It began to rebuild itself with spare parts. Again,
so that's how we get the mimic in Ruin. That makes
someone
sense.
to free it so it could take its revenge. All the while, M1 was working on putting her son back together. She was uploaded to Fazbear's system, took control of the Pizzaplex and a young woman called Vanessa. And with Vanessa's help, she was able to start rebuilding her son, a new mimic robot that looked just like David did before he died.
That's right,
kind
people. The security breach with all those laws and
alive and
stuff.
well. We theorized in our very first security breach theory that Gregory is actually a robot version of the Crying Child, due to just an avalanche of evidence. The fact that they look the same, the fact that Gregory doesn't have any records or parents, that he was living in the Pizzaplex, that Gregory is referred to as broken rather than injured, that when Glamrock Freddy gets Roxy's eyes, he says,
You look different to me.
that he has CRT-style vision when Vanny gets too close with what sounds like a sound illusion disc. There's his robotic actions that he takes in the books. Quote, he cocked his head and studied Tony for several seconds. And to top it all off, we have the post-it room, which is covered in notes, starting in binary, but then beginning to turn into phrases we know David Afton would have been saying, like party time or birthday time, like a robot coming into consciousness and learning the identity it's supposed to be taking on. The party was for him, after all. All the signs point to him being a robot version of the Crying Child. It just made so much sense. And now I present you with this image. You can find it during the parachute ending of Secret of the Mimic, and it's of David sitting on top of a hill with M. You can find it during the parachute ending of Secret of the Mimic, and it's of David sitting on top of a hill with M1. Now, tell me, does that look familiar to you?
The security breach image with Gregory sitting right next to Freddy's head and Freddy right next to him, and/or Freddy's actual body.
It's almost identical to the image we get from the
Yeah,
burn trap
that
ending
one.
in Secret of the Mimic, with Gregory sitting on top of a hill with his protector, Glam Rock Freddy. We are once again being shown the same looking
Wait, hold on. Okay. Hold on for a second. I can't tell if those if those are supposed to be stripes on his shirt or not. I'm gonna have to brighten up that image or something later on down the line. Hold on. Let's take a quick snapshot and I'll brighten up the image and show it in editing or something.
Of the Mimic, with Gregory sitting on top of a hill with his protector, Glam Rock Freddy. We are once again being shown the same looking scenario because they are meant to be showing us the same characters. Gregory is M1's attempt to recreate her broken child, David, M2. That might even explain why we get Gregory dropping the elevator on Cassie at the end of Ruin. It could be M1 or M2 controlling the system to get Cassie to come back, or it's because Gregory is still following his programming, acting under the orders of his mother, M1, to bring the family back together. Now, before anyone gets too mad at this idea, I recognize it's not perfect. For starters, while there's a bunch of evidence that does work when you look at it through the lens of M2 is the Crying Child, the trouble is, it basically all hinges on the secret ending being the canon ending, which is kind of hard to prove at this point, especially without the DLC or a sequel. Outside of that, there just isn't a lot of evidence for this line of thinking. You essentially have
you know what? After this video, I'm honestly starting to consider about the secret ending actually being canon. I originally thought that the secret ending wasn't gonna be canon, but I'm having mixed feelings now.
It's confirmation bias. The idea that your belief is correct, and so you can find evidence that works because you already believe it to be true. That's not to say that this couldn't be the answer. All I'm saying is that right now, with the evidence we have, it can feel like a bit of a stretch. There's also the issue of M2 being in the basement of Ruin. I still firmly believe that the Mimic we meet in Ruin is M2 from Secret of the Mimic. So by having M2 go on to be the Crying Child, you have to jump through some weird hoops hopes to make it survive Secret of the Mimic but still end up locked away before ruin happens. And those hoops are entirely speculative. It's me knowing point A and point C and essentially just making up point B to fill in the gap, which isn't typically how I like to do things because it's speculative at best and fanficky at worst. There's also the small things, like why would we hear a flatline in FNAF 4 if David Afton was just a robot M2 the whole time? And of course, there's Greg Bot, the most Marmite of our FNAF theories in recent years.
Sure.
Some people love it and some people hate it. In fact, most people hate it. And believe me, I get it. I would love for some of our human characters to just be their own thing rather than copies of others. Plus, with M2 down
Plus, we do have another childlike character inside of Security Breach now, Cassie.
It means we end up with 3 mimics running around. And that just feels unsatisfying from a story perspective. Let's just say Vanessa is also a
That
robot,
we're not
like
actually calling a robot right now.
Seems to imply, and just have a full set. And that was kind of the point of this whole experiment. If we've learned anything from Secret of the Mimic, it was that everything we thought we knew, at the end of the day, were just theories. We don't have all the pieces of the puzzle, and so we're left to interpret what we do have. And that can be done a couple of different ways. That doesn't mean a theory is wrong, necessarily. It's just that nothing can be truly said with certainty. A new game or book or, heck, a toy could drop and suddenly it's back to the drawing board. We have to be open-handed with these ideas, explore all the avenues, and find the answers we think work best. If you don't like this interpretation, that's okay. There's a whole other ending of this theory waiting. FNAF's lore is open to you. And to really nail that home, I'm actually going to be going live right now. After this episode goes live with John FNAF, Rytos, ID's Fantasy, Hyperdroid, and Dorco to talk about all of these interpretations and more in our live theorist talkback. So come by, say hi, and in the meantime, remember, it's all just a theory. A game theory!
I actually like
Thanks for
this one,
watching.
not gonna lie. You guys can go ahead and disagree with me in the comments. That's your opinion. This is my opinion. And yeah. Alright, now here's the part where it's called William is actually innocent.
I see the concept of a Fazbear conspiracy caught your interest. Can't say I blame you. You're a theorist. Video game conspiracies are literally what we do best. And this connection between these characters immediately seems suspicious. It couldn't just be a coincidence, right? Oh no, my friends. This rabbit hole is big. Big enough to fit every iteration of William Afton we've had throughout the years. No, not you. Get out of here. What I'm trying to say is that a coincidence implies this kind of similarity has only happened once. However, thanks to Secret of the Mimic, we've actually got a bunch of quote-unquote coincidences between the original set of games and the new lore we've learnt about from this new game. Just look at one of the other important Murrays, Edwin. He is a brilliant robotics engineer whose life is defined by 2 things: his incredible world-changing inventions and the soul-crushing loss of his wife and son. He's a genius haunted by tragedy, whose own creations ultimately become twisted into something monstrous and turn against him, killing both him and his son. Now, flip over
And
to
his
what the
wife.
original games told
No,
us about William
the Mimic
Afton, a
didn't
creative
kill the wife,
robotics
sorry.
genius whose entire family story is defined by loss and tragedy at the hands of the killer robots he created. Baby kills Elizabeth, Fredbear kills David, and Michael is then killed by the Fun Times. We also have the mysterious and absent Mrs. Afton, who we've theorized about in the past being represented by Ballora, the musical ballerina.
We still haven't figured that out, by the way. Where's Miss Afton? What happened to her? Where did she go? Did she die and get stuffed into Ballora?
Because of the song she sings.
Scott, you can't just give us another war about another freaking family and not just finish the freaking Afton one. Okay? Tell us what happened with Miss Afton, and then you can move on to other families, okay?
You hide inside your wall.
We are looking for gamers who want to learn how to be.
Hide inside your walls. When there is music in my hall, all I see is an empty room. No more joy, an empty tomb.
A Again, doesn't that sound familiar? Almost like it's exactly how
Yeah.
M1 Fiona feels. Her husband locked away inside his walls, trying to work on projects, not spending any time with her.
I miss you.
All with the room of their dead child laying.
Honestly, I could see William and okay, never mind. I would take that back. I could see Miss Afton and Fiona bonding. Not gonna lie.
Empty, waiting to be filled by M2. But wait, there's more! There's the old house on the hill with a secret underground workshop, the Murray house above MCM, and the Afton house above sister location. There's a robot designed to be a babysitter that essentially fails at their duty. Security puppet was designed to protect Charlie, yet she dies, and M1 Fiona, who was designed to protect David, and yet he also dies on her watch. There's the burning down of a facility, but the main villain survives it. There's mysterious molten metal that works as a kind of power supply for the machines created, giving them life, as it were. You have the primary villains of the franchise, Afton and M1 Fiona, wanting to put their children back together, and there's then the wonderful and ever underutilized baby, who gains sentience after the accidental death of William Afton's daughter, Elizabeth. William then rejects her, banishing her to a secret underground lair he built beneath the house. A near beat for beat parallel of M2's story of rejection from Edwin. I could go on, but I think you get the point. The number of times the stories from older games paralleled the stories of the Murray family cannot be purely coincidence. It's a pattern. They say history is doomed to repeat itself, but when it's this much, and when it involves as shady a company as Fazbear, you know there's something more going on. And that something is bigger than I could have ever imagined. Ladies and gentlemen, the reason these things all line up so perfectly is for one simple reason. The stories from the first 7 games, the ones that told us everything we knew about Henry, Charlie, William, Elizabeth, Michael, and David, are entirely made up. Now, to some degree, we knew this already. In my theory crafting livestream, I kept bringing up the idea that in Help Wanted, we are told point blank that the games were just that, games.
Were total fabrications from the mind of a complete lunatic.
The books corroborated this with stories like The Monty Within, where kids refer to Pizzeria Simulator as an in-universe game, where the mediocre melodies come from. But we also learned from Tape Girl that the whole indie dev story wasn't entirely truthful.
It's an elaborate cover-up to make light of what happened.
And so we basically used that line as a way to explain away some of the inconsistencies, but really the stories were just as we originally thought. However, since then, we've had a few more pieces of evidence that would seem to suggest they're not fictionalized versions of real events, they're just fiction. One of the earliest stories from Tales from the Pizzaplex is Help Wanted, and in it we learn about Steve Snodgrass, a developer that was hired by Fazbear to make the first 3 to 4 games to make light of the rumors of murder and death surrounding the business. But as he works on it, his mind begins to fall apart thanks to sound illusion discs. Not only did Fazbear never tell him what the story really was, he was working purely on rumors, he was also being driven insane. So how possible is that? And in the Walmart exclusive Tales story Monster, we're going that deep here. We learn about a kid who writes stories about a pizzeria owner in the local paper, claiming that he is a serial killer and abuser, turning the whole town against him. In fact, the stories he whips up sound an awful lot like the FNAF 1 newspapers we see in the game. But throughout the story, we're told explicitly that these stories are completely fictional, fabrications made up by a kid with a grudge. And if that's the case, we're being shown that these FNAF 1 newspapers also can't be trusted. And with that in mind, it makes you question what else can be trusted. Of course, I'm not saying that...
Oh my god, bro.
And with that in mind, it makes you question what else can be trusted. Of course, I'm not saying that absolutely everything is fake. If we have corroborating evidence, especially from the Steel Wool era of games, the ones that took that meta approach and revealed to us the real world that these games existed in, then we should be good to go. Like, we do know that William and Henry existed. They're mentioned in Secret of the Mimic audio and text logs. Likewise, a FNAF...
Oh, hey, Logan.
F6 location definitely existed because we find it underneath the Pizzaplex. And clearly there was an incident or incidents that Fazbear wanted to cover up with a set of video games in the first place, as we're told about in Help Wanted. However, what I'm saying is what caused those events might now be something entirely different, because outside of those in-universe games, we don't really have any evidence for them. And so we can't rely on them as 100% true, or even rely on them happening as we saw them at all. all. And when you open up that can of worms, suddenly everything we thought we knew is thrown into question. Was William Afton actually a murderer or just an awful business owner? Did Michael die and come back to life as a purple husk? Was anything ever really possessed by spirits to begin with? Maybe instead of a murdery business owner with a bunch of ghost children possessing animatronics, it was always just a rogue AI that Fazbear got their hands on, they couldn't control, and had a habit of stuffing people into suits that could also mimic the behavior and voices of children. I mean, Scott did say that was the kind of story he was more interested in telling.
I know there's a little bit of a divide with maybe me and the fan base. I have a tendency to lean sci-fi, even though I try to come back into the roots of the supernatural. So anything that involves possession of AI or possession of machines or circuitry, I love that sort of thing.
That would be an absolute PR nightmare. In fact, it would have been more than a nightmare. It would have been the PR apocalypse. Admitting to the world, oh yeah, our proprietary self-learning AI has absorbed the trauma of its creator, developed a violent streak, and has now started stuffing customers into animatronic suits. We don't know how to stop it, and we are liable for all of it. That would be the end of the company. But if you had a scapegoat, like a jerk boss who happened to die on the premises in one of their faulty spring-lock suits, oh yeah, it was totally him. Our founder was secretly a monster. We all knew he was a jerk, but we didn't think he'd go this far. He did everything, but it's over now. The monster's gone. Case closed. And things like FNAF 6. Was it a gathering of ghosts, or was it a corporate cleanup? A recall, where Fazbear did what it could to contain their rogue AI, sending something like a recall signal, or a specific frequency or data packet that would force any machine running the Mimic program to be drawn to one location. And that famous speech, it isn't a heartfelt eulogy, it's Fazbear cementing Afton's role as the fictional villain, putting a final neat bow on their scapegoat, with the real fire probably just being a calculated attempt to destroy all the evidence of their rogue AI. And for a while, they probably thought they succeeded, and so they built the pizza place on top of the old establishment, only to reintroduce the Mimic via some old circuit boards. William Afton, his family, their story was created to turn Fazbear's failure in stopping the mechanical mess they adopted into a spoopy ghost story. And not only did they rewrite Afton's history, but to be sure that people wouldn't trace it back to their acquisition of Murray's Costume Manor and Edwin's Mimic, they took parts of Edwin's story and planted it onto their founders. Fiona was a puppeteer, and so M1 was translated into a puppet created by Henry to protect his child. One of the most traumatic events of Edwin's life, the death of his son, became the death of Afton's son, the Bite of 83. The echoes of M1's Fiona's grief over her lack of connection with Edwin after the death of their son turned into a verse from a video game. A ghost's lament. One of M1's final messages to Edwin,
It is me. I'm Fiona.
became the words screamed by another overarching and vengeful spirit. Even the words that Edwin actually spoke to M1 Fiona about M2, that it could never replace his real son, are now just the infamously confusing line we hear in a fictional show.
The baby isn't mine.
Fazbear may not have stolen Edwin's inventions, but they did steal his story, twisting it and removing all memory of Edwin and his contributions from the equation. His merits and faults split apart and grafted onto a scapegoat to keep it all in-house, while also absolving themselves of all wrongdoing. But while I think there is a lot of evidence to support this whole idea, from the parallels in the games, lines in the books, even Scott himself, there's just one issue that I cannot shake. It kinda sucks as an answer. It's basically turning around and telling us, yeah, the last 10 years of theorizing, it doesn't matter, start over. And that is just super disheartening for us fans who have spent all those years trying desperately to take small pieces of the puzzle and put them together in such a way that we create a cohesive story. We've spent 10 years building up our ideas of Afton, of Henry, of the crying child, only for this idea to essentially flush them down the drain. It's one of the reasons why some of the early reactions to Secret of the Mimic's lore were so angry and frustrated, because Secret of the Mimic's whole thing was revealing to all of us that we didn't really know the truth about what was going on, even though we thought we did. It was revealing information we basically had no way of knowing until very recently, which is tough compared to the, quote, good old days, where even though solving FNAF was hard, it felt like the pieces were all there for us to use, rather than key information being withheld for the sake of it.
Difficult, but it was still possible.
twist. And
This seems
theory
like it's
kind of just
impossible to solve at this
perpetuate that idea.
point,
It would also make
Scott.
theorizing incredibly challenging going forward, at least more than it already is. We can speculate about how some elements might fit together, as I've done a little bit today, but it's just that, speculation, because we don't have any sense of how much those old games can even be used as evidence. I'm sure a bunch of you out there hate this idea. Heck,
Yeah,
I don't really
I
like
hate
it
it.
either. We here at Theorist have been big proponents of Scott rebooting the franchise and its story for quite some time. This, however, wasn't what we meant. But there is some hope, because this, like every video, is a theory. And if Secret of the Mimic taught us anything, it's that we don't have all the pieces of the puzzle at this point. All we can do is interpret what we have as best we can, and that can be done in a couple of different ways, like we've done with today's theory. If this ending isn't up your Bonnie bowling alley, you can always go and check out the other ending for today's theory that is a little more on the keep everything canon side. At the end of the day, the important thing is that we are open-handed, be willing to explore all the avenues and work together, because that's
Yeah, I like
how
the
we
other
solve
ending
this
better.
weird and wonderful franchise. And right now, I'm going to be doing just that by going live with John FNAF, Rytos, ID's Fantasy, Hyperdroid, and Dorco to talk about all of these interpretations and more. So come by, say hi, and in the meantime, remember, it's all just a theory. A game theory! Thanks for watching.
10 out of 10.
Alright, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, make sure to have a big fat thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next video and or live stream. Peace!